Welcome on, Sean Highkin, independent award-winning reporter covering the Portland Trailblazers for the Rose Garden Report. Welcome on to the Deep NBA podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
No worries. And do you mind, I guess the first place to start off is, do you mind just introducing yourself to our listeners?
Well, I've been covering the NBA for probably 10 or 11 years full time at this point. I've written for a number of national outlets, including USA Today and Bleacher Report and The Athletic. And I was based in Chicago for a while. I was covering the Bulls, and then I moved back to Portland, which is where I grew up. And for the last 2 seasons, this is my second season covering the Trailblazers pretty much fully independently at the Rose Garden Report, which is my own Substack newsletter, which you can sign up for a paid subscription at rosegardenreport.com. That's kind of the very, very basic notes of it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And obviously all links to your work in the Rose Garden Report will be in this episode description. But yeah, just before we start talking about the trade deadline that thus far has been a little bit tempered, how'd you get into NBA reporting? What's your journey to get into writing and so on?
The short version is that I, grew up a huge NBA fan, and I was always, I did when I was in high school, I was like on the newspaper, and I was liked writing, and I liked journalism. And at the time that I started, there was a lot of, I started at kind of like the golden age this would have been when I was in college. It was like the golden age of the blog game, which I don't know how old you are or how much of this stuff you remember, but back when like Free Darko was a thing, or the ESPN True Hoop networks, and I started writing for Hardwood Paroxysm. Matt Moore brought me on there, and that kind of led to some other opportunities. And this was back when people who were writing for those sorts of blogs and websites could get actual gainful employment out of writing. I have no idea what the path would be right now for somebody who's just starting out, because the industry is in such a weird place. But that's the extremely short version of kind of how I ended up where I ended up.
Yeah, awesome. It's good to hear. And I think I was reading some of your stuff when you were with the Athletic on the Bulls as well. So we'll again do all the shout outs to all your content at the end of the podcast as well. But yeah, definitely a great writer. So I appreciate the stuff that you're doing.
Appreciate that.
But yeah, let's get into it. So this episode talking about the Portland Trailblazers. Trade deadline is in a couple of hours, maybe less than 24 hours. I'm not sure on my American time zones, but what's the situation from your view with the Portland Trailblazers at the moment, just ahead of the deadline?
Honestly, right now I don't really think they have a whole lot of anything going on, at least as it stands right now. Obviously something could change, but the two guys that have kind of been having their names come up the most, as far as, we all consume all the same NBA content. We all read the same websites. We all listen to the same podcasts. And so there's like a general list of like 50 or whatever names that are like always seen as like, oh, these are the trade candidates. These are the trade targets. The two guys with Portland that have come up most consistently on those sorts of platforms have been Jerami Grant and Malcolm Brogdon. And as far as Jerami Grant is concerned, I've done reporting on this. Other folks have as well. They are not interested in trading Jerami Grant. Like, I think there was this idea that, they re-signed him to this big contract, and as soon as Damian Lillard asked for a trade and they were going to be rebuilding, every rebuilding team has to trade away any good player they have that's over the age of 22 and is making more than like a veteran's minimum or a rookie contract, and should only have young players and prospects on their team. They don't view Jerami Grant as somebody that they're looking to get off of the money or anything like that. At least for right now, they like having him as a veteran influence, and also, frankly, they want to have good basketball players on the team. So Jerami Grant, I don't think, is really going to factor into anything. And Malcolm Brogdon, I would kind of lean as of right now towards him not being moved. I think it's still a possibility, and I know that's somebody that a lot of teams have called on, because you would think that a lot of teams, who are trying to make a playoff push could use a steady, reliable veteran point guard like that, who is good on both sides of the ball and is also under contract for next year. So they're getting calls on that. I don't think they're really interested in basically the types of offers that you would expect, where it's just like, salary filler and a first round pick in this upcoming draft, which, first of all, they already have 2 first round picks in this draft, and it's also seen as not the greatest draft. So I don't think that's something that's really moving them in that way. I think they're more interested if they're going to trade any of these guys. I think right now they're more interested in players than they are picks. And by players, I mean guys who are maybe, 25 and under, who are actually, either proven or high-end prospects, as opposed to like last year at the deadline, they basically took like flyers on guys like Cam Reddish and Kevin Knox, who were probably not going to stick, but they said, this is a lost season, let's just try them out. Now they have so many of their own young guys that they actually like and are invested in developing. It's not like they really feel like they're in a position to just throw guys out there who are maybe fighting to stay in the league or playing for a contract or something like that. I don't think that's something they're really looking to do. And then the other thing I think that could factor into this is the news that came out yesterday that Shaedon Sharpe, who's one of their most important young guards that they're building around, is going to have a core muscle surgery, which is the same surgery that Damian Lillard had a few years ago, and a couple of other guys on the team have had it in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. And they haven't given a timetable for his return because he hasn't had the surgery yet. But I personally am operating under the assumption that he's probably going to be done for the season. That's just my own guesswork based on having seen that surgery play out and how the rehab goes. I'm guessing he's probably not going to play again this season. And at that point, you got to play somebody. So if you don't love any of the offers from Malcolm Brogdon, I think they might as well just hang on and delay it until the summer. And because I feel like if the offers are just like a not great first round pick and salary filler, he's under contract for another year. You can get that kind of deal in the summer, I think. So that's kind of where those two guys stand.
Yeah, and we saw when Portland did try to trade for him, it was off the Pistons, and it was that Bucks first round pick, which I thought was quite low for Jerami Grant. And I was like, oh, okay, this dude's like 3-and-D-ish, maybe his best position's defending fours, but like that Bucks pick, it's in the late 20s. So it's like, what's Portland going to do with the late 20s pick? Especially if you've already got 2 picks. We know how hard it has been in recent years to bundle multiple first round picks to trade up because the higher picks are just more valuable. But going back to Jerami Grant there a little bit, heading into this offseason, heading into this trade deadline, I was like, oh, well, that's a piece that you could flip, blah, blah, blah. And then I started reading a little bit more, and it was there were some reports coming out saying, can I just say also, when I was writing this run sheet, whenever I do a run sheet with myself or Dante, whoever I do the podcast with, we always write the news and then just who has the news, so we can always give a hat tip there. It was pretty cool writing hat tip Sean Highkin for this Jerami Grant is happy in Portland. Like, that's the dude coming on the podcast.
Yeah, well, I've gotten to know Jerami quite well over the last 2 years that he's been in Portland, and I've been covering him. And here's the thing. Most people assume, and you have to remember, Jerami is a guy, and this is not any kind of a value judgment at all on a guy, but most people assume that any player is just 100% consumed with, I have to go play for a contender no matter what. You have to remember that Jerami Grant left a Denver team that had just made the Western Conference Finals to take basically the same money to play in Detroit because he wanted a bigger role when Detroit was rebuilding. And then, he kind of wanted to go to Portland because Dame brought him there. But the way, with Jerami as of right now, kind of where things stand with him, he got paid, he's getting plenty of shots, and he also, from like the personal standpoint, he just had his first kid over the summer. And so I don't think he's really dying to move his family in the middle of the season. That's not to say that they couldn't maybe talk about doing something in the off season, but if both sides decide it makes sense. But I don't think right now either side is operating from a standpoint of, they're trying to move him or he's trying to get somewhere else. I think for right now, both sides are happy with just continuing to have him in Portland and have him be kind of one of the veterans. And the other thing about it is that the Brogdon stuff made a lot of sense as far as that it being rumored that he was maybe going to be on the trade block, because who are their most important guys that they're building around in this rebuild? Scoot Henderson, who's a guard, Shaedon Sharpe, who's a guard, Anthony Simons, who's a guard. So it would make sense that maybe Malcolm Brogdon is somebody that could be sort of expendable if you can get something for him from a better team at the deadline. Obviously, that's a little bit less now because with this Shaedon Sharpe injury, it makes a little bit more sense to keep Brogdon. But you look at their roster and you look at kind of these young guys that they have. Jerami Grant is not blocking anybody's minutes that really needs them. Like it's not like Jerami Grant is here and they have this, guy that they spent a high draft pick on who's also a power forward that is just not getting minutes because of that. Like that's not really the dynamic that's at play with Jerami.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I sort of like about keeping Jerami is I really like when you've got a young point guard like in Portland's situation with Scoot, it's really nice just to have a pick and roll partner or just someone you can pass the ball to. Like I think a really good example is in Memphis. I'm not the biggest Jonas Valanciunas fan, but at least like with Ja Morant, when he was first year point guard in the league, he's at least got Jonas who knows how to catch a ball and knows how to finish a layup, right? And like LaMelo Ball might not have the best finishers on his team, and like LaMelo is still exceeding as a point guard. But just imagine if he had a guy who I don't know about JV's like long-term potential in as the starting center on a contending team, but just as a rookie point guard or a young point guard, just being able to pass the ball to someone. And so for Scoot, who's been coming on a lot more in the second half of the season, or second half of the first half of the season, it's good having guys like that and DeAndre Ayton to a lesser impact as well. But just having a guy like Jerami Grant, where it's like you're going to pass him the ball, he's scored 20 points per game before, that he's going to be able to do something with it, as opposed to having two pieces sort of. You're up in the air with both pieces.
That's the thing about this. That's the thing about the way that they're approaching this rebuild from everybody in the organization and in the front office that I've talked to. They when I say like they want to have veterans on the team, this isn't just like the locker room and advice stuff that you kind of hear about. This becomes sort of a cliche when it comes to that sort of stuff, but they have these young guys that they are investing so much in the future, whether it be Scoot Henderson or Shaedon Sharpe or whoever. They want to have those guys be playing in situations where there are stakes. And I mean, obviously, they're not going to make the playoffs this year or probably next year either, but they want to have these guys not just, they don't want to be the process Sixers and they don't want to be, what Detroit is this year or what Washington is this year, where they're just throwing these young guys out there. Right. Throwing these young guys out there who are totally out of their depth. And it's just like, well, they're getting a lot of minutes. They're getting a lot of reps. That just means that they're going to get better. You look at what happens, you look at what happened in Houston last year. Their whole roster was kids and it was a disaster. And so then they spent a ton of money to bring in Fred VanVleet and to bring in Dylan Brooks and just to have a little bit of competence and have a little bit of adults, in the room and good, frankly, just good basketball players who can, be out there with these young guys, because these young guys are going to get better if they're playing with good players. And so they feel like, we already have Jerami Grant, who's a, 20-point a game scorer. We already have Malcolm Brogdon, who's a pretty, reliable veteran point guard who can play on the ball or off the ball. And, they feel like he's been really good for Scoot's development. So I don't get the set. I don't think they want to take any, like, I think they've taken, obviously when you trade Damian Lillard, who's a all NBA guy perennially and is a top 75 player of all time, when you trade a guy like that, you're taking a pretty big step back as far as coming into the season thinking you're going to be competitive for the playoffs. That's obviously not where they are now. I think they've taken all the steps back that they want to take. I don't think they want to take more steps back. I think they want to, use the rest of the season to look at, Scoot, some of these other young guys, see what they've got, and then try to add to that, as opposed to saying, well, we're going to go into next season and also try to be one of the worst teams in the league so we can get another good draft pick. I think they're kind of at the point where they more want to, like I said, when they're if they were to trade any of these veterans, they're more interested in players than they are in picks. So that's kind of where their mindset is right now.
You want to talk WNBA? Maybe some WNBL? Australian Opals chat? Heck, even dabble in some EuroLeague? Find the W Basketball Show on the Deep 2 Podcast Network.
The Jeff Van Gundy Tribute Show is your fortnightly dose of the lighter side of basketball, hosted by me, Marco.
And me, Lucas. We take a more laid-back approach, talking about the NBA, the WNBA, FIBA basketball, culture, whatever tickles our fancy or grinds our gears.
The show is filled with great guests, classic gags, and a healthy dose of tangents in honor of the great man himself.
The Jeff Van Gundy Tribute Show, fortnightly on the Deep 2 Podcast Network.
Loves just talking about the league, certain things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I read somewhere that they would Portland's sort of interested in having like that Houston rebuild where it's like, look, they've got their guys, they've got their blue chip prospects in Scoot and Shaden and so on. And next year, instead of bringing in a Fred VanVleet and bringing in a Dylan Brooks, you've sort of already got them on the roster like a Jerami Grant and like a Malcolm Brogdon. Is that sort of are you getting that vibe from the front office that they sort of maybe want to make a leap into the play-in next year, or is it sort of just wait and see how it goes?
I don't think they're gonna make, because I think they don't want to shortcut anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think they would be, I've gotten the sense that they're not gonna mess with do what they've done the last couple of years where they're like manipulating the lottery standings and just like not playing any of their guys and playing G-leaguers to move back in the lottery or to move back up into like higher in the lottery. I don't think they're gonna go out and suddenly, trade 3 first-round picks for a guy to think that, I'm trying to think of an example of a team that's like I don't think they're yet in a position where they would do something like what Indiana just did, adding Pascal Siakam. I think they're maybe a year or two away from thinking about doing that kind of thing. But I think as far as next year, I don't think there's any sort of thing of we have to make the playoffs or we have to make the play-in. I don't think they would be upset if they did make the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to be actively saying, "Oh, we have to do that this year. We have to be in the play-in." I think especially with next year's draft being seen as much stronger than this year's draft, they would be perfectly happy to have a lottery pick next year, but they also are not going to be mad at if they were to somehow make a play-in push. I don't think they would think that's a huge setback or anything, or that that's too rushed or anything.
Yeah. Look, I completely agree. Moving on from the trade deadline, just this current season and yourself covering the Portland Trailblazers, how has it been? And we'll start off with Scoot Henderson. How's it been covering a guy coming into the league, having a bit of let's just call it a slow start, but then really ramping up in the past couple of weeks? How's it been covering Scoot? And have you got any sort of inside information about what he's like as a person? I mean, I myself have never spoken to him, so any tidbits there you could share?
Well, Scoot's a great kid. Just first of all, like great personality, super positive energy all the time. Just always, he comes in, he's always smiling. He's just very very, very, very infectious, like energy that he kind of has about him. And, all the stuff you hear about him behind the scenes is, puts in the work, good teammate, guys like him, coachable, all that kind of stuff. And actually the thing that I really have enjoyed about, covering him and following him this year is he posts on his Instagram story all the time, and he posts like highlights, but he mostly is not posting his own highlights. He's posting like his friends' highlights or his team. Like he's posting like other guys on the team. Like he'll post like a Shaden Sharp dunk highlight with like the head exploding emoji or something, or like he'll post like he was posting like during the summer, he was posting like Matisse Thybulle and Duop Reith's Australian national team highlights, or he was posting like Dyson Daniels' highlights because they played together on the G Ignite. Like he's all about like hyping guys up and is a really good teammate in that way. And again, just from a personal standpoint, and I've gotten to know him a little bit, but great kid, great personality, all that kind of stuff. The on the court stuff, like you mentioned, has been kind of slow to catch up. He started out, I mean, I bet he would tell you this too. He was, we don't need to sugarcoat it. He was terrible the first month of the season. I mean, he had an ankle injury for like a little bit of a part of it, but it was pretty rough early on, which you would kind of, and I have been kind of trying to caution people about this all summer, which was that, point guard is the hardest position to play in the NBA to learn at the NBA level. And I think people like people who are fans of the team that I cover, the last time they had a heavily hyped rookie point guard was Damian Lillard, who was really, really good his rookie season and came in pretty much a finished product and won Rookie of the Year and was awesome right away. People forget that Dame was a 4-year college player and was 22 when he came into the league. That's a lot different than coming into the league at 19. And, he played in the G League, which is against professionals. But first of all, it's a lot fewer games, and also just the physicality of it. And I've been going to a lot of these G League games because the Blazers actually have a G League team now. And a couple of weeks ago, they played against the Ignite, which is the team in the G League that Scoot played for, which is like the elite prospects kind of development lab team. They have a couple of guys who are projected top 10 picks this year with Ron Holland and Modest Buzelis. And seeing it in person, it is the physicality that these guys are exposed to playing for like the G League Ignite and playing against other G League teams is not at all on the same level as what you're going to get in the NBA and the speed and any of that stuff. So it was going to take some time for Scoot to kind of get used to it. You're starting to see, and he's not all the way there yet, but you're starting to see, the stuff slowing down for him. You're starting to see the decision-making being a little bit better. You're starting to see him get to his spots more comfortably. You're starting to see some things. And again, this is also another reason why I think they're going to, unless they are overwhelmed with an offer in the next 16 hours, they're going to probably end up keeping Malcolm Brogdon, is because they have liked Scoot coming off the bench. I mean, obviously, long term, you would hope that a guy you take with the number 3 overall pick is going to be a starter. But for this year, they have felt like him coming off the bench and getting to kind of see the game develop for the first 5 or 6 minutes before coming in, and then and then also getting to play against other teams' bench players, as opposed to coming in and like you got to guard Kyrie Irving, or you got to guard Russell Westbrook, or you got to guard whoever
from the first shot.
I think they felt like that has that's been beneficial for him, and I think that's something they want to keep doing the rest of the year. And then, I think obviously people on social media or in some of these media outlets or podcasts or whatever are going to overreact to anything. After 10 games, there were people like, "Oh, Scoot's a bust," or like you see that kind of stuff. And I think they've seen, from what I've asked people in the organization, everybody is pretty happy with where things are right now compared to where they were at the end of the season. And they feel like, down the stretch after the All-Star break, they're going to see more growth from him. And then, we'll see where it goes from there. But I think overall it has been slow. It's been up and down, but I think people are happy with where it's at.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a little bit of a downside of having such a saturated media market, I guess, for basketball, is because the start of the season just means so much. I mean, I guess at the start of the season it does, but a lot of people will set their expectations or set their decisions on a player in the first 10 games, and they go, "Oh, well, there's that photo of when Scoot was chasing down Russell Westbrook, and he's just like, it just looks like a fanboy, like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm playing on the same basketball court as Russell Westbrook," which is like, that's exactly what you want from your rookies. Like, it's pretty awesome what you get to do, but then I feel like he sort of had that negative stigma from then on moving forwards, and that's taken a lot of good games, positive basketball to come out of that a bit. And yeah, it is a little bit of a downside, but I think like the second half of the season, it should be great with or without Malcolm Brogdon.
I think the other part of some of the the negativity is that because the Blazers went into the draft basically hoping that they could use the pick to trade for somebody to put next to Dame. And then not only were they not able to get a deal like that done, but they used the pick to draft a player that played Dame's position. And that directly led to Dame requesting a trade. Then suddenly it's not just, they drafted this point guard who's, seen as a really promising prospect, and he's 19, but it could take some time, but he could be really good. Now it's, they drafted Damian Lillard's replacement and pushed the all-time franchise leading scorer out of town because of this guy. So this guy better also be a Hall of Famer. I think is where a lot of that, and then especially when you look at kind of how ugly a lot of the stuff got this summer with the leaks and just kind of the way the trade requests and all that stuff played out, and the Miami thing and all of that. There was a lot of okay, well, they pushed Dame out. Basically, well, Dame requested a trade because they drafted this guy, so this guy better be good. And so when he isn't in the first 5 games of the season, then it becomes this whole other thing. I think the more time that passes from that, I think people have been able to look at Scoot. It's kind of the same way that what DeAndre Ayton had to deal with in Phoenix, and his season has been pretty up and down here. He's been really, really good the last couple of weeks, but it's been up and down before that. But when he was in Phoenix, there was first of all, there was all the weird stuff with Monty Williams or whatever, and some of those playoff series, but as long as he was in Phoenix, he was always going to be the guy that they drafted instead of Luka.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't matter how good he was or wasn't, or what he did, or the fact that they made the finals in like his third year in the league and he was the starting center. They could have drafted Luka. And with Scoot, it's kind of, at least early on, I feel like it was kind of the same thing of Dame requested a trade because they drafted this guy. So this guy better be as good as Dame to justify that. And then, he's a 19-year-old kid learning how to play the toughest position in the league. It wasn't going to happen right away. And I think long-term Scoot is going to be fine. And, just like going back to some of the personal stuff, like, he has a good head on his shoulders and he puts the work in and he has a good, like, he gets really down on himself when he has a bad game, but he's not like he's going to be the first one to tell, like, oh, I had too many turnovers in this game, or I didn't shoot well in this game. Like, he has handled coming off the bench fine. Like, he seems totally, fine with that. And it's, at least for right now, as far as a developmental thing, he's not coming in saying, like, I was the number 3 overall pick, I have to start. Like, he understands kind of the process, at least from the sense that I've gotten from talking to him about it. And he watches a ton of film and he puts the work in and tries, is really, I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah. I agree as well. I think he will be fine as well. It is 19 years old, hardest position in the league. And yeah, he's 20
now. He turned 20 over the weekend, so technically he's not a teenager anymore.
Yeah. Well, just moving on a little bit there. You mentioned Damian Lillard, and I know this isn't on the run sheet, but as a dude who I assume you rooted for Portland growing up, coming from Portland, what was it like going through the whole? And feel free to not answer this question if you don't want to, as an independent reporter. But what was it like going through that whole trade request and the whole process? And obviously, we know that it was right up until pretty much training camp that he got traded to Milwaukee. What was that like as a fan and as a reporter?
Well, I grew up a Blazers fan when I was a kid, but when you've done this professionally as long as I have, you kind of the personal fandom of a team, and and you also like throw in the fact that like I also covered the Bulls for 4 years, so it's like it's not like the fan part of it hasn't really existed for me for a long time. So there's that part of it, but honestly, man, this summer was just more annoying to me than anything else because, like, you understand why the trade request happened because he wanted to contend. He really wanted to stay here and he wanted to contend, but it became clear that they weren't going to do that, and he decided he wanted to go somewhere else. That's totally reasonable on his part, but I think that the way that everything unfolded, where there was this, the week that he requested the trade, there's all this, his people are putting out all this, like, he only wants to go to one place. There's only one team he's willing to go to. And meanwhile, those of us who, I know Dame quite well and, have covered him for a long time, and all this stuff that, his people were putting out there about, like, if he gets traded to another team, he is not going to show up to camp. He's going to pull a James. And anybody who knows Dame at all is like rolling their eyes at that because that's just never been who he is. But really, like, the whole offseason was, there was that whole, there was the first week where he requests the trade and suddenly all this stuff is coming out about like where he wants to go. And then basically nothing happened until 2 or 3 days before training camp when he finally gets traded to Milwaukee. And so then there's a whole summer's worth of just nothing is happening. There aren't really any talks going on, or at least that you know about. You come to find out later they had been talking to Milwaukee for a while and it just hadn't gotten out. And one of the conditions of the talks was for it not to get out, because I think the Bucks were very sensitive to the idea that Drew Holiday would hear that he was in a trade rumor and he would react a certain way to that given his importance to that franchise. But for our purposes, there was no, like, Portland and Miami like didn't talk all summer, but there was still all of these different things that were coming out that were like, well, Miami might have upped their offer to this. And it's like, they haven't talked. I don't know why people like, and it's those things where it's just like, there's a whole summer's worth of just, and, also just given some of the fan base dynamics that I've been able to observe, things got, and I personally try to stay above this stuff as much as possible. My buddy Danny Meringue, who's one of the other guys that covers the team, he's a radio guy here. He was spending the whole summer like getting into it with people and getting into it with Miami fans, getting
exhausting.
it into. I love the guy, and like, and he'll be the first to tell you, like, he likes to mix it up a little bit. I was just kind of trying to stay back and just kind of
Yeah.
stay above that stuff as much as possible, because like there's nothing really to gain from getting into it on Twitter with some
Yeah.
guy who like
The guy
what
with
like
a Damian Lillard Photoshop jersey in his profile picture. Like you just know you need you
right. It's like,
never
okay, like what is that doing? Like that's not the other part of it that I thought was really funny was like I think at one point I said on a podcast that when I was just I forget what podcast it was on, but I was a guest on someone's podcast, and I
Mhm.
was talking we were just kind of talking through the stuff that Miami had to offer, which Portland was never interested in, just to talk through it. But we were just talking through like, what they had, and I had heard, because, we get to go to all these pre-draft workouts during the draft process, like when they bring guys in for workouts.
Mm.
They brought Jaime Jaquez in for a workout. And from everything I had heard, he killed his workout here, and they really liked him.
I'm
And,
sure he did. Like he's killing it in the league.
well, right, but there's a difference between, somebody having a really good workout and being kind of a high floor, mid-teens draft pick, and
Mm.
being, somebody that's like the centerpiece of a Damian Lillard trade.
Yeah,
But anyway, and also I don't think he was ever offered by Miami, but that's a whole that's a whole other thing. But like my point being, like I literally just said in passing on a podcast that I had heard that Jaime Jaquez had a really good workout when he was here in Portland. That's all I said. And some Miami account like heard that podcast, clipped that part of it, and it became report. Blazers are demanding Jaime Jaquez in a Damian Lillard trade.
Yeah.
And then I start getting these replies that are like, you just killed Portland's leverage by saying they liked Jaime Jaquez. Now they can't act like Miami doesn't have good stuff. And I'm just like, nothing I say or write is going to have any, like, I promise you that this is one of these things that, like, I hate to, like, this is one of these things where, like, I have to remember that most people aren't as, like, in it as I am, or that you are as somebody who, like, does a, podcast, like, in the media space. Most of these people are just, like, fans and don't know how this stuff works. And I have to, like, be mindful of that. But it's like, I promise you, GMs are not, like, on Twitter looking at fans like trade machine proposals and being like, you know what? That's a good idea. Like, I'm gonna go do that now. Like, or like, oh, I'm not gonna trade for this guy because this one person said on a podcast they think that they like this guy, or that they don't like this guy, or like people, like, I have no influence over whether any that's the thing that I think people, like, I report what I hear, and in some cases give an opinion about something, but those of a lot of, in most cases there are, a few people that do have the ability to influence outcomes, but I do not. I have no impact or influence on whether a trade happens or not. It does not matter whether I think something is a good trade or something, or this guy is worth this much money. Like, these teams have their own processes. They have their own. I mean, people get paid a hell of a lot more money than I do to make these decisions. They are not taking my opinion or your opinion or anybody else's opinion into account. It was just like a whole summer of that kind of stuff, with like people going back and forth at each other about stuff. And meanwhile, nothing was actually happening, and talks didn't really pick up with anywhere until like a week before training camp started. And then he gets traded to Milwaukee, and then he puts out the thank you letter, and then the Chris Haynes piece comes out, which is like the Dame spin of it, and then the Woj piece comes out, which is the Portland front office spin of it, and then that's a whole thing. And then, but meanwhile, they still haven't done the Drew Holiday part of the trade yet, and then they do the Drew Holiday trade where they get back a couple more picks, and Malcolm Brogdon and Robert Williams, and like, just, and then 2 days after that, training camp starts. So I know, actually, it wasn't even 2 days, because like, I'm pretty sure I might be misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure on Sunday, October 1st was when the Drew Holiday trade happened, and then Monday the 2nd was media day. So it's like you can't even catch your breath from, like, it happened so late in the summer that like you can't even catch your breath from this trade that everybody's been talking about all summer, and there was no activity on at all, finally happens. And then it happens, and now suddenly you have to turn around, and the team that I'm covering has like 10 new players that I have to like, okay, I got to try to like, get to know this guy. I got to read up on this guy. And some of them, you know, quite a bit about, like a DeAndre Ayton or, you know, Malcolm Brogdon, who's been in the league for a long time. And then some guys like Tumani Kamara, who I thought was just like a throw in that from the Phoenix end. But then I went back and looked, and like I have a list of guys that they brought in for draft workouts, and they did bring him in for a workout during the pre-draft process. So I think he was somebody that was on their radar. And so now it's like, okay, like I don't really know anything about him. So now I'm going to go, you know, look, try to do some research and try to figure out what this guy's deal is. And it's just like, it's actually funny. So like a week ago, it was actually exactly a week ago, Dame came back to Portland for the first time with the Bucks. Yeah. And that was the first time because, like I just said, the trade happened like immediately before training camp, and then you immediately are just like fully in like new season mode, training camp mode. Now I have to just focus on all these guys that are in front of me and getting to know them and, you know, figuring them out and all that kind of stuff. You really don't have that much time to, you know, if Dame had gotten traded in like the middle of July or like August or something, and then there's a whole month left to go before the start of training camp, then I think there would have been a lot more of like looking back and, you know, for me as a writer, you do like, oh, you know, the 10 greatest Damian Lillard moments or like what he meant to the city or whatever. Like you do all that stuff. Didn't really have any time to do that stuff because training camp was like about to start when the trade happened. Yeah. And so now it's like, you know, he comes back and now it's like suddenly, you know, now you think about like, oh, yeah, this guy was here for 11 years and he was the franchise's all-time leading scorer and, you know, also a guy that, you know, a lot of people loved and did a lot of stuff in the community. And it was a big deal for him coming back and all that kind of stuff. So now, so it was, I'll say this, I'm glad that summer is over. I think ultimately both the Blazers and Dame ended up in a good enough spot for what they were trying to do. But I hope I don't have to go through something like that again anytime soon. It's very annoying as somebody who covers a team.
Yeah. And from a content point of view, you go from having that farewell Dame article and like, you know, the top 10 moments to all of a sudden, you've got all the training camp news. You're trying to break down two massive trades. So then I guess a little bit of a gift that it did happen, you know, in late January where you can have that farewell and, you know, welcome back Dame, but also goodbye Dame. But yeah, that would have been. But
also
hectic.
as far as the content side of it too, like in the summer, like there was nothing to write about all summer unless you wanted to just lean into talking about every single one of the rumors that's out there or the leaks about the Miami trade offer or him saying he wouldn't go to training camp with another like. And I personally, like, I'm not really into just like leaning into that type of stuff. That's just never really been what I do. But then there's a whole, but then the other thing is like Portland basically did not do anything else that summer as far as moves or signings or anything because everything was on hold until they saw what direction the Dame stuff took as far as what they got back in the trade. And then you fill in, you know, what you have to fill in.
Yeah.
So it was a whole summer of trying to find stuff to write about. And you know, this is the biggest story in the league. The whole summer was Damian Lillard is requesting a trade. And people were asking me like, oh, this must be great for your subs. This must be great for business. And it's like, well, not really, because there's nothing to say about it. Like he requests a trade. He wants to go to a specific place. The team that he wants to go to doesn't really have stuff that Portland likes. That stuff was all true on July 1st. And, you know, that stuff continued to be true all summer. So it's like, there's nothing to talk about. So it was a struggle to find stuff to get, you know, to get through that summer as far as like a content standpoint without just rehashing the same stuff everybody else has been talking about and just when there's no new information or no new developments about anything.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, moving forward, looking at the future of the Portland Trail Blazers, I guess like again, anything could change if there's a massive offer that comes in that just blows Portland away. You know, the roster might look different tomorrow morning, but we're going to assume, and I think that's correctly to assume, that nothing will change in a major way. What would you say are some of the goals for the Blazers, and what are you hearing are some of the goals for the Blazers moving forwards with this season?
Well, they just want to see continued development and improvement from some of their younger guys. I mean, obviously Scoot is the main guy that we've talked about, but some of their other guys, like they really like, and he's just started playing more recently, but Chris Murray, who was their number 23 overall pick.
His first start the other day, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, and that's a guy that he's been playing in the G League, and he's one of these guys that I think like he's looked more comfortable, and since he started playing in the G League, and then the other one, the guy that I personally would like to see play more. And you might be a little bit familiar with him being in Australia because he played for the New Zealand Breakers last year. He's French. His name is Ryan Rupert. And he's like a 2-3, and like he kind of long, like he's super, super raw.
So
like long term,
it's crazy how long his arms are.
Well, right, but he's super raw. Like he has, but like long term, I think he has like they think he has a lot of like 3-and-D wing upside, and he's a guy that I think is another guy. Like he was terrible at Summer League because again he's 19, he was just totally out of his depth. But he's been playing 30 minutes a game in the G League, and he's been getting a lot better and getting a lot more comfortable. So I think they are hoping that there's an opportunity to kind of turn him loose in some of these late season games and actually see what he looks. That's going to be the thing that's interesting about this season, because you probably are going to get to the point towards the end of the season where they're shutting down guys like Jerami Grant and DeAndre Ayton and Malcolm Brogdon and some of the veteran guys to give their younger guys more looks and stuff. But it's going to be so much different this year, because last year there were basically no guys that were playing in those games that were actually, it's like just Shaedon Sharpe and Jabari Walker who were just playing were the guys that they actually viewed as like guys that they want to build around long term. Literally the rest of those games were signing G Leaguers. Like they had like 10 guys on hardship contracts because they made up injuries for all their veterans. And so there was literally no point in watching those games because none of the guys that were even playing had any kind of future.
Next season. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Now it's like they have 6 rookies that they are all of whom are guys that they actually like and want to keep playing and developing. They have a couple of second-year guys. So it's like, I think for myself covering it's going to be more interesting. And I certainly would hope for fans it's going to be more interesting that, they may be shutting down their veterans and knowing that they're going to lose a lot of these games. But at least the guys that are going to be playing and these young guys are going to be out there, or at least guys are going to still be here next year and are still going to be around. So I think that's at least going to make it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the dudes that you can shed a little bit more light on this for me, but Skylar Mays had pretty much a very, very long cup of coffee with the Portland Trailblazers. He was waived earlier in the season, and he was playing quite well. Roster reasons, but I thought he was good enough to keep. Do you know why they didn't decide to keep him?
Just money, flexibility.
Okay.
It was like right before the rosters became fully guaranteed, and they wanted to keep the flexibility open. That's all that was. And he's on a 2-way with the Lakers now. Yeah, I love Skylar. He's a solid third point guard, and also just a great dude. Like one of the nicest guys I've ever covered. So I was personally a little bit bummed when they let him go. But that was just a roster flexibility thing. And so we'll see what happens tomorrow if they trade somebody and have to take back multiple players. They have a couple of open roster spots, and then they have to fill another, they're no matter what, they have to fill another roster spot. And I think the way that they're going to do that, and another Australian guy is Duop Reith, who's on a 2-way contract and has pretty much been their backup center. He's really good. He's also I don't know if you watched that video that Matisse Thybulle posted.
I did, yeah. The vlog on Matisse Thybulle.
Well, just like Wop's whole story and like talking, like, awesome. But like he's somebody they like, and he's somebody they want to keep around. So and he's going to hit the 50 game limit for the 2-way guys. So no matter what, after the deadline, they're going to convert because they have to, because he's going to hit the limit. They're going to convert him from a 2-way to a full NBA contract. So that's at least one, even if they don't do anything at the deadline, that's at least one move that is definitely coming.
And moving on a little bit more opinion based, you've got 2 boomers on your on the roster that you cover, Matisse Thybulle and Duop Reith. How do you think Australia's going to go? We were quite disappointing in the World Cup, but how do you think we're going to go? And again, be kind. This is an Australian-based podcast. How do you think we're going to go at the Olympics? Are we going to get a medal again?
So who's playing? Because so if we assume that Tease and Wop are both going to be playing, then you've got what? Dyson Daniels.
Daniels, who really needs to really get minutes. We weren't, and hopefully we will this tournament. Josh Giddey, assuming he can still play. Josh Giddey will be the starting point guard.
No comment on that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to touch that, but yeah.
And Josh Green would be the fifth starter there. That's a lot of small guards and maybe small wings. We've got some great NBL players. Like Chris Goulding's always going to get a roster spot, and he can just hit as many threes as you want in the 5 minutes that he plays in all of these international tournaments. But where does that stack up in your eyes against the rest of the world?
Well, we'll see who's playing where. I mean, I think it sounds like the U.S. team is going to have all the heavy hitters come. Like LeBron is talking about.
Do you think that's going to happen? Because we sort of hear this every year, but are they going to come?
I think they are, because it's the Olympics and because it's LeBron's at the end of near the end of his career. I think him and Steph want to go, one last, I suppose. But I mean, Canada's obviously really interesting with SGA and Dylan Brooks, and you saw what they did at the
it's great.
The FIBA tournament, and the French team is going to be really interesting, since it sounds like Wemby is going to play, right?
Yeah.
So it's like Wemby and Rudy Gobert, and like, is Batum going to play one last time? Like the French team is interesting. Let me ask you this, because you sound like you follow like the NBL reasonably, somewhat. What do you think of Alex Sarr? Because that's a guy that I would expect that Portland would be interested in if they get high enough in the draft. That's somebody I think they like.
Yeah, I think of him on defense like Jaren Jackson Jr., but much stronger on offense.
Comp I've heard.
Yeah, but so imagine like as a rookie, he'll be 5 years in Jaren Jackson Jr., and that's like just an incredible player. Really strong, really versatile. And whatever team he goes to, I'm going to love him on that, because he can just fit anywhere. And as a rookie, he's probably going to be playing the 4. And you talk about how it's actually interesting hearing you say that the G League Ignite, like when they're playing against G League teams, the thing you watch and the thing you hear from draft guys is, hey, they're playing against grown men, and it is a grown men's league. It's not college. But it's interesting to hear you say that, these G League Ignite guys, like, yeah, they're getting experience against professionals, but it's also not as strong as the NBA, which is,
right.
It's a bit of an unfair critique. How do you be as strong as the NBA? But the NBL, I don't know. I haven't been in the building.
It is a very physical league, and that's something they said about. That's something they, I remember when they made the draft. I didn't really know anything about Ryan Rupert when they drafted him, but at his opening press conference, Chauncey Billups was talking about like, yeah, Ryan has played in a very, very physical league in Australia, so he's, we think he's gonna have like, so like, It would be pretty funny if for 2 years in a row, the Blazers draft a French guy who played in the NBL. That would be pretty funny if that was like what they did 2 years in a row.
It is a physical league, and sometimes to its detriment, because it's just less flashy. But every now and again, Aaron Baines will just get into it with a player or with a referee and stuff.
Is Aaron Baines still kicking around in the NBL?
Yeah, he is.
Good for him, because I know he had some pretty serious health stuff at one point.
Yeah, at the Tokyo Olympics. Look, I don't know if he's going to make the Boomers squad. It would be good to have a bit more muscle. Yeah, that was a crazy story. But yeah, Alex Sarr, I love wherever he's going to go, and I hope it's the Portland Trail Blazers for your sake, because I really think it's a weak draft. That's what everyone's saying. The last weak draft had Giannis and Steven Adams and Victor Oladipo in it, but it's a weak draft. But I think it's very, very good at the top. The top might just be the first pick.
Yeah. We'll see. It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, just before we wrap up, I've got one question I like to ask all my guests. But were there any other comments you wanted to talk about the Blazers before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered everything.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, the one question, you might have seen this in the run sheet. The one question I like to ask is, when you buy jerseys, you can get those really the really good jerseys that are a couple of $100, and it's like
the
$500
stitched as opposed to the screen.
Yeah. If you had to get one of them, or maybe you had to get it as a gift for any player, past, present, future, who would you pick and why?
This is a funny question, because I love, one of my favorite things, and anybody who follows me on Twitter knows this, I love to just, if I see a picture or if I see somebody at a game wearing like a super, super obscure jersey of just like the most random role player that like that's probably the only jersey of that player that exists.
Yeah.
I'll take a picture of it and post it.
Yeah.
But I haven't actually owned or worn any jerseys since I was like a little kid.
Fair enough.
So I'm not the one to ask about this, but
let's say you can hang it. You're going to spend $500 to frame it and hang it in your room.
well, it can't be a Blazers player because I would feel weird about having a jersey hanging up of somebody from the team that I cover, which is like that gets into kind of weird.
Yeah.
That's a good. That's a yeah. You know who I was a big. I'm just gonna. This isn't like. Don't hold me to this, but you know who I was a huge fan of when he was on the Nuggets in 2009 was Birdman.
Yeah, that's
Chris
a good
Anderson.
one. That's a good
Chris
answer.
Anderson.
Like I'm a Warriors fan. My answer is Maurice Spates, just because.
Oh yeah,
Like where do you get a Maurice Spates jersey from? I've looked. It's very hard to find one.
you can't get a
something
custom
like
one.
Birdman's good, but yeah,
You can't
could
get a custom one?
But then this is all hypothetical. I don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on a jersey that, just like you, I haven't worn since I was a teenager. So
Well, like you don't want to, but also like I would think they would sell those because especially we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of those first couple of Warriors teams. Like you would think anybody that was on one of those teams is gonna you could probably get a jersey of.
yeah, except for
like I know everybody's getting like the Steph, Clay, Draymond, Iguodala, but like you could probably get a Sean Livingston jersey if you wanted to.
Yeah, well, Sean Livingston's another one that I've got a framed picture in my room, but I want the jersey. But yeah, Sean Livingston and Maurice Spates. So is Birdman Denver Nuggets the Silk Denver Nuggets one?
Oh yeah, it has to be that one. It has to be that one. I liked him as a role player on the Heat too when LeBron was there. Like I like that like late career renaissance of his too. That guy was. We don't have as many characters like that anymore.
Yeah, no. Maybe we're just in a lull, up and down. Maybe we're going to get a bunch of characters.
Or maybe it's just that everybody now is so like polished and so like, you have to have a brand. You have to, everything you do has to be like for social media. Like there's no more like, that's why Anthony Edwards is so like, as far as like the younger generation of stars, Anthony Edwards is awesome because he just will say anything and just,
I love it when the basket might picks up him just like talking absolute shit to Kawhi Leonard or something. That's so good.
It's so good. It's
like
so
good.
good. No,
for as much as I love like Scoot Henderson following Russell Westbrook, like, oh my God, I'm playing with Russell. Like, I do like Anthony Edwards coming in as a rookie and just being like, who are you? Like, that's great.
Yeah, well, because my favorite one was when I don't know how familiar you guys are with baseball in Australia, but do you know who Alex Rodriguez is?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so when Alex Rodriguez bought the Timberwolves, like the same year that Anthony Edwards drafted, he did some interview where they were asking him if he like grew up, and he was talking about like, oh, I used to be a really good baseball player growing up, and they were like, well, what do you think about A-Rod owning the team? And he was like, I don't even know who A-Rod is, and then somebody tells him like, oh, he was actually engaged to Jennifer Lopez, and he was like, whoa, really? That's crazy. like I just honestly like I think a lot of the kids, and Scoot is not as like outlandish of a quote as Anthony Edwards is, but like they have similar energy. They're just like super youthful and super like high energy, and it's just I don't know. I like this younger generation of kids that are coming into the league. I think a lot of them are really interesting and promising.
But what you're saying is it's going to be hard to get that role player's jersey. Like maybe the guy right now is Naz Reid. Like he's maybe that we're going to look back on as the Mo Spates and the Birdman sort of guy.
Well, the Blazers, one thing I'll say about Blazers fans is that they will get a role player's jersey. Like you go to a game, you're gonna see a lot of Dame jerseys. You're gonna see a lot of like Brandon Roy and Clyde Drexler and LaMarcus Aldridge and whatever. But like I'm already starting to see Toumani Camara jerseys in the crowd. And, like, you go to like some of like the late like I still see Robin Lopez jerseys all the time. I still see like there are guys like a Travis Outlaw. I still see a fair amount of those. That's like Bonzi Wells. Like
Well, my mate came around 2 days ago and picked up some picked up some shorts that I'd bought for him, and he was wearing a Jaden McDaniels jersey, which I was like, that's nice. He's also got a Perry Jones, which he's going to love that I'm telling you. He's got
Oh wow, that's what Oklahoma City Perry Jones.
Yeah.
That is strong. That is strong, and that's one of those ones where like I remember he fell in the draft because he had like knee problems or something, and Oklahoma City got him at like 27. And anytime a team that's seen as having a smart front office like Oklahoma City or Miami or San Antonio, whenever they get somebody like late in the draft, there's always and this was like when the Warriors got Jordan Bell in the second round, and it was how did the NBA let Jordan Bell fall to the Warriors? That's an absolute steal just because people give like those.
He had a 5x5 in summer league. That's all I'm saying.
He did.
Yeah. Obviously I'm based in Australia. I've only been to America once in 2019, and I was in like New Orleans and Memphis, and I went to the FedEx Forum in Memphis, and I couldn't believe that and you'll have to tell me if this is what it's like in Portland, but on the wall they just had all 15 roster spots, and they had a jersey for every single player. And I remember sitting there I was still in university or college, and I was just sitting there going, man, should I spend $100 on a Wayne Selden the fourth jersey right now? Like that's going to be something that is an incredible one to buy. And I didn't. And then my friend was in Cleveland a couple of months ago, and he saw Golden State at Cleveland, and he's like, oh, Sean, do you want me to get you something? I'm like, yes, please. Now I'm going to finally like make up for not being able to get this Wayne Selden jersey. So I texted him. I said, can you get me a Dean Wade jersey? Right. And he's like, no problems. This guy doesn't follow basketball at all. And then he messages me the next day. He's like, man, I went up to the counter and said, do you have any Dean Wade jerseys? And the dude just looks at me like, no, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, I'm really sorry for putting you in that situation. Then I thought it was like this. Is Portland like that, or all 15 roster spots on the wall?
No, but you can get a custom one pretty easily for anybody you want.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. Just do you just want to give us a little shout out? Where can people find you? Twitter, socials, Rose Garden Report?
Yeah, well, all of my social media, Twitter, X, Instagram, is just my last name at Highkin, Highkin. That's my handle across all those platforms. And then just go to rosegardenreport.com and sign up for a subscription. You can sign up for free and get some of the stuff. I would encourage people to sign up for the paid subscription, because that's how I keep what I'm doing going. And I like to think that the people who are subscribed to what I'm doing and they sign up for the paid subscription get their money's worth. I think I give people a lot of quality for the money. So I would just tell you that if you're, I don't know whether you're a Blazers fan or you're just interested in reading about the team as a general NBA fan, I think that's where I would direct people towards.
Yeah, beautiful. And links to everything you do will be in this episode description. And thanks for coming on the pod.
Awesome. Great.
The NBA moves so quickly these days, it's hard to keep up. Shams and Woj are breaking stories left and right, but the Quick Time Out is right there with them to keep you informed on the latest NBA news. Stop in and let us break it down as it happens. Find the Quick Time Out on the Deep 2 Podcast Network.